The ambassador's shuttle glided gracefully into the cavernous docking bay of Talos Station. Its gleaming silver hull stood out in sharp contrast to the pitted and scorched freighters and/or haulers surrounding it. Kesla watched apprehensively from the observation deck as the sleek craft maneuvered to an empty berth with precision thrusters. Even after decades of faithfully serving the Corellian people as an engineer, and now a negotiator, Kesla couldn't shake the unease that came with dealing directly with the other starfaring races, especially this new upstart species called humans. As a Corellian, Kesla belonged to a race of silicon-based life forms that most of the galaxy considered bizarre at best, and unnatural abominations at worst. With hulking, rock-like bodies, molten lava that flowed through their veins instead of water, and the ability to thrive in scorching heat that would melt the flesh from most aliens' bones, the Corellians were as different from the galactic norm as a comet from a sun. For millennia, that fundamental differentness had kept the Corellians isolated from the rest of the civilized galaxy. The other species shunned contact, refused trade, and spread vicious rumors, painting Kesla's people as soulless monsters. The interstellar confederacy barely tolerated their existence on the fringes. The Corellians' only value came from their unrivaled skill at starship engineering, honed over centuries of building and maintaining vessels to withstand their harsh native environment. The Confederacy races begrudgingly purchased Corellian star drives at a premium before chasing the rock devils back to the barren, smoldering wastelands they called home. But then, not long ago, a new species had burst onto the galactic stage. The humans of Earth. Like unruly children, they stubbornly explored, colonized, and innovated with a brash confidence that bordered on reckless arrogance in the eyes of the staid Confederacy. The humans thumbed their noses at the way things had always been done. They forged their own path, driven by insatiable curiosity and individualistic ideals. In doing so, they upset the status quo and made powerful enemies. And to the surprise of all, instead of shunning the Corellians as monstrous outcasts, like the other races did, the humans had reached out a hand in friendship and proposed an alliance. Many Corellians, Kesla included, were still suspicious of their motives. Allies were an utterly foreign concept. As the human shuttle finished docking, Kesla steeled her nerves, checked that her environment suit was properly sealed and pressurized for the frigid station, and made her way down to the receiving bay to meet the ambassador. The human ambassador emerged from the shuttle, clad head to toe in a silvery suit nearly as thick and bulky as Kesla's own. The necessity of it highlighted the vast physiological gulf between their two species. "Greetings," the human said, her voice muffled through layers of protective material. "I'm Ambassador Sullivan. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Kesla inclined her head in the human greeting custom she had studied. "I am lead negotiator Kesla. Your arrival honors us. Please, let us adjourn to the meeting chamber so we may talk in comfort." The ambassador followed Kesla through the worn and Spartan corridors of the station, built for utility, not aesthetics. Once they were settled across from each other at the exotic wooden conference table the Corellian had imported at great expense for this occasion, Kesla began. "So, tell me, Ambassador Sullivan, why have you traveled all this way? Why do you seek to ally your species with galactic pariahs like us, at the risk of damaging your standing with the Confederacy?" "Please call me Asha," the human said warmly, and the answer is simple. Unlike the Confederacy, we see the Corellian potential as friends and equals. Your skill, your strength, your integrity in the face of adversity. We believe that together, we could accomplish tremendous things, such as, for starters, we recently discovered an Earth-like moon orbiting a gas giant in our home system. Initial scans show it has an atmosphere and geology very similar to your species' native requirements. Kesla's lava-red eyes widened. "You're offering us a world? Freely?" "Well, not exactly freely," Asha admitted. "We can't politically justify giving away an entire moon, especially one so close to Earth. There would have to be some conditions, some exchange of goods or services, but if your people are interested, we're fully prepared to hammer out an equitable arrangement." A fierce hope rose in Kesla's chest before suspicion tamped it back down. "And what would you ask in return?" What is the cost? To start, simply a chance to get to know you, to learn and work together as friends. If we can foster genuine understanding between our peoples, I believe everything else, trade, mutual defense, scientific collaboration, will flow naturally from there. Kesla pondered the human's words, scarcely daring to believe them. A new Corellian colony, access to a habitable world, an end to their lonely isolation. It seemed too good to be true. The analytical part of her mind ran through the potential motives behind the human's unbelievable offer. A ploy to gain exclusive access to Corellian star drive technology. A trick to sabotage Corellian ships and leave them defenseless. Some sort of convoluted political gambit to gain leverage over the Confederacy. But looking into Asha's earnest eyes, Kesla sensed no malice or deceit. Perhaps, as unthinkable as it seemed, the humans truly did intend this alliance to be an equitable partnership, an outstretched hand to a downtrodden people long accustomed to clenched fists. And what if it was genuine? The opportunities it presented, the chance for the Corellians to at last claim their rightful place in the galaxy. It was worth the risk. They had endured alone as outcasts for too long. It was time to grasp their destiny. Ambassador Sullivan, Asha, Kesla said slowly, I cannot speak for all, but I will bring your proposal to the Corellian leaders with my full support. I believe this could be the start of a hugely beneficial relationship for both our peoples. The human's eyes crinkled in what Kesla recognized as a smile behind her visor. Wonderful. I look forward to further discussions, to a new era of friendship and cooperation between humans and Corellians. As they shook hands, the thick gloves an awkward barrier, Kesla allowed herself to imagine it. Corellians and humans working side by side as equals, combining their strengths, breaking free of the prison of prejudice and isolation that had confined the rock people for so long. It seemed an impossible dream, but perhaps with their strange new allies from Earth, could become a reality, a beautiful, revolutionary reality. Kesla left the meeting in a daze, her molten blood quickening with excitement and trepidation for what the future might hold. A future where the Corellians were no longer shunned and exploited, but respected at last. All because of the savage, yet kind, humans who looked past surface differences to see a worthy friend in the monstrous form everyone else feared and reviled. It marked the beginning of a new era for the Corellians, the humans, and the galaxy at large. An era of unprecedented change and progress that would be remembered for generations. And it all started with a simple handshake between a rock and a human, the most unlikely of alliances. Over the next several years, the alliance between the Corellians and humans grew and prospered. True to their word, the humans helped the Corellians establish a colony on the moon they named New Corellia. Human terraforming technology and equipment sped up the process of making the moon's atmosphere denser and more hospitable for the Corellians. Human and Corellian scientists worked tirelessly together to seed the moon with native Corellian flora and fauna, transported from their homeworld, creating a familiar yet exciting new ecosystem. For the first time in their history, the Corellians had room to expand, to build, to create a civilization of their own beyond the overcrowded confines of their birth planet. And with human protection and support, they could do so without fear of Confederacy interference or sabotage. In return, the Corellians shared their vast knowledge of starship engineering and manufacturing with their new friends. Shipyards were constructed in orbit of New Corellia, jointly operated by human and Corellian workers, to churn out new vessels of unprecedented speed and durability. The Corellian-made ships formed the backbone of a burgeoning human merchant marine and exploration fleet, fueling a rapid expansion of Earth's commercial and scientific interests across the stars. This mutually beneficial arrangement drove both species to new heights. On the moon's surface, human and Corellian researchers collaborated to study each other's anatomy, genetics, and biochemistry, making groundbreaking progress in xenomedicine and cybernetic interfaces to bridge their physical differences. The exchange of ideas and culture blossomed as well. While wary at first, the Kayans grew increasingly comfortable hosting curious human visitors in their magma-heated cities. Likewise, teams of Corellian delegates made goodwill trips to Earth, where they toured the great capitals in specially designed environment suits and gave lectures on their ancient history and unique perspective on the universe. Children on both worlds grew up learning each other's languages and customs. Friendships formed, partnerships were forged, and the notion of humans and Corellians as anything but staunch allies began to seem absurd to the younger generations. However, the Confederacy and other galactic powers watched the growth of this alliance with mounting alarm and consternation. Corellian and human technology advancing in lockstep at a breakneck pace threatened to upset the balance of power. Humanity's brash confidence, coupled with the Corellians' unmatched engineering prowess, made for a formidable combination. Grumbling over the unseemly alliance, the humans embracing the unnatural rock people as equals, grew into clandestine campaigns to undermine the alliance through sabotage, sanctions, and smear tactics. The Confederacy condemned humanity for betraying its fellow organic species to consort with silicon-based abominations, but the harder the Confederacy tried to drive a wedge between them, the more stubbornly the humans and Corellians banded together. They took the attempts to economically isolate them as a challenge, striving for full self-sufficiency between their two systems. When malfunctions struck, Corellian ships carrying human passengers or human mining outposts came under attack from rogue elements. The Allies merely doubled down on their mutual defense commitments and efforts to safeguard their peoples. Forced to confront the hostility and bigotry of the galactic community, humans gained a newfound empathy for the prejudice the Corellians had endured for millennia. In the Corellians, they recognized a kindred, rebellious spirit, one unwilling to conform to an unjust status quo. Far from driving them apart, the external threats and pressures only served to further unite humans and Corellians. It gave their alliance a new, higher purpose. Not just practical cooperation, but moral defiance of the old, intolerant galactic order. As the propaganda and proxy conflicts escalated into a state of Cold War, Corellians and humans came to see themselves as the vanguard of a new era. One defined by respect for diversity, scientific progress, and the right of all species to forge their own destinies, free from oppression. Jointly operated shipyards and research labs worked around the clock, developing cutting-edge defenses and engines. The Allied systems became a fortress of high-tech military and industrial might. But the Allies knew that walls and weapons alone would not protect them forever. To secure their independence in the long run, they needed to drastically level the playing field, which is what led Kesla, now science director of the Alliance, to invite her old friend Asha, now a vice admiral, to a top-secret lab hidden deep within the moon's molten core. "Asha, thank you for coming on such short notice," Kesla said. "You sounded urgent." The human replied, eyes bright behind her suit's visor. "I hear your team made a breakthrough?" "More than a breakthrough, a paradigm shift that could change the face of the galaxy." Kesla led Asha over to a large vidscreen, displaying a complex web of equations and diagrams. At the center, a pulsing simulation of what looked like a ship trailing a crackling wake of exotic energies. "We know that the key limitation of current warp drives is the devastating energy release when a ship drops out of warp too close to a planet," Kesla explained. "This restricts in-system maneuverability and makes travel times between gravitational bodies impossibly long." Asha nodded. "And the energy required scales exponentially with the mass of the ship, so it's only feasible for small craft. Hence the dreadnought limit that keeps capital ships ponderous and predictable. Trust me, I know it well. What if I told you we found a way around it?" Kesla said, hardly daring to hope. "A new negative energy configuration that siphons off the harmful tidal forces into subspace, allowing a ship to enter and exit warp with pinpoint precision while subject to almost any gravitational influence." Asha's eyes widened as the implications struck her. Warp skimming, tactical flexibility, rapid force projection without fixed gates? And since most of the energy is being redirected instead of dampened, the mass requirements dropped by a factor of 100,000. Kesla confirmed. With this drive, a human cruiser could go toe-to-toe with a Confederacy battleship twice its size. "My God!" Asha breathed. "You did it, Kes. This is the game changer." Once we outfit enough of the fleet with these drives, the Confederacy's capital ship advantage disappears overnight. And combined with your new inertial dampeners, we can bring the fight to them, if necessary, Kessler said grimly. Even in the hearts of their own systems, we'll never have to bow to their unjust whims again. We can declare our independence on our own terms. The galaxy won't know what hit it, Asha said, a predatory gleam in her eyes. When do we start refitting the fleet? As soon as you give the word, Admiral, Kessler replied with barely restrained pride. The two friends clasped hands, reveling in the shared sense of destiny before them. The next chapter in the saga of human-Corellian cooperation was about to unfold, and the galaxy would never be the same. Just as Kessler predicted, the advent of the new warp drive technology instantly transformed the balance of power. Aging Confederacy battleships suddenly found themselves outmatched by the agile, hard-hitting human cruisers that could appear without warning and dance circles around their lumbering hulls. Corellian supply ships could blaze straight past the economic blockades, deliver their goods, and be out of the system before the heavy interdictors had a chance to power up their gravity wells. The noose that had been slowly tightening around the Allied systems fell slack. Faced with this abrupt turn of events, the Confederacy found itself in an unfamiliar position, one of weakness. For too long, they had underestimated the ingenuity and tenacity of the upstart humans and their Corellian allies, dismissing them as uncultured primitives and unnatural freaks. Now, as reports poured in of the Allies' ships running circles around their fleets with impunity, the Confederacy scrambled to respond, desperate to contain the crisis before it got further out of hand. But with every countermeasure, they were weeks, months behind the latest human Corellian innovation. Reverse engineering the new warp drives proved next to impossible, so cunningly integrated were they with other cutting-edge Corellian technologies. Scientists throughout the Confederacy tore their hair out, trying to adapt the principles to their own ships. As the situation grew more dire and the proxy conflicts escalated, hawkish factions in the Confederacy began to push for extreme solutions. Total economic excommunication, assassinations of key leaders and researchers, even preemptive strikes to wipe out the shipyards and research centers where these dangerous technologies were birthed. Ironically, it was the Confederacy's own aggression that drove the final nail into the coffin of their technological superiority. For their hostile actions only served to convince the Corellians to take the gloves off and deploy their full arsenal of exotic science. Graviton beams, inertial manipulation, quantum disruptors, biotechnologies bordering on transhuman. These were wonders the Kayans had kept carefully hidden for centuries. Knowing the chaos that could result should they fall into the wrong hands, the greatest creations of their silicon-based minds, deemed too dangerous for a galaxy that barely tolerated their existence. But now, with their human friends' lives and freedom on the line, the Corellians held nothing back. Across a dozen far-flung battlefronts, Confederacy warships found themselves beset by weapons they could barely comprehend, much less defend against. In the diplomatic arena, too, humanity and the Corellians went on the offensive. Leaked recordings of high-level Confederacy officials discussing plans to sterilize the human Corellian problem, once and for all, dealt a devastating blow to the moral authority of the galactic institution. Disillusioned member species began to fracture off, declaring neutrality or even tentative support for the Allied cause. The Corellian story of surviving centuries of lonely persecution struck a chord with disaffected peoples across the galaxy who had long chafed under the Confederacy's rigid rule. As the rebels gained ground, the aliens who had shunned and despised them now looked to the Corellians and their human champions as unlikely liberators and visionaries, charting a bold course into a new era of the galactic community. Their vision was one of cooperation and coexistence between vastly different forms of life and mind, of technology and knowledge freely shared for the betterment of all, of old prejudices discarded in favor of mutual respect and appreciation for diversity. Emissaries from a dozen species journeyed to New Corellia and Earth to see this partnership society with their own eyes. What they found astounded them. Corellians and humans living and working side by side, bridging the vast gulfs between their biologies and cultures with an ease that would have been unthinkable a generation before. The unique strengths of their divergent psychologies and approaches, rather than being points of contention, combined to push the boundaries of creativity and innovation in dazzling new directions. Confederacy propaganda had long portrayed the Corellians as monstrous and the humans as foolish savages seduced by them into abandoning their fellow organics. But all the delegates saw was two species joined in a bond of friendship and common principles far stronger than the mere ties of outward physical similarity that had long constrained the galactic calm. Unity's imagination. In the Allied systems, these emissaries glimpsed the seeds of a new galactic order, one that valued individual liberty, free exchange of ideas, and unity in diversity, and they returned to their own worlds bearing an alluring message of change and something that had been in all too short supply: hope. Faced with a wave of systems and species slipping from their grasp, inspired by the Corellian miracle and its promise of a brighter future, the Confederacy doubled down, resorting to total war and scorched earth tactics in a desperate attempt to preserve the status quo that had always favored their most powerful and entrenched interests. But it was too little too late. The Confederacy was a brittle, hidebound thing, and the Human-Corellian alliance had already cast the stone that would shatter it. Forced to sue for peace or face total collapse, the Confederacy accorded the Allied systems full independence and sovereignty, and pledged to respect the rights of all species to seek their own destinies. The old galactic order was dead, and the Allies now stood at the center of the new one, rising to take its place. As the galaxy began to rebuild and reconnect along principles of cooperation and mutual respect, the Human-Corellian alliance found itself in an unfamiliar position, one of leadership. The eyes of trillions now looked to the unlikely partnership that had overturned an eon-old system and proven that strength could come from embracing differences instead of fearing them. The Allies met this challenge as they had every other. Together, drawing on their hard-won wisdom, they helped guide the emergence of new galactic institutions to facilitate trade, cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, and the peaceful resolution of disputes between the myriad peoples and forms of life that called the galaxy home. Emissaries from Earth and New Corellia journeyed far and wide, learning all they could about their galactic neighbors and sharing their own stories, values, and aspirations. Where once humanity and the Kayans had been ostracized and oppressed, now they were welcomed as valued friends and mentors, for they had shown that no sapient species, no matter how outwardly monstrous or strange, was beyond the capacity to connect, to come together in common cause when treated with simple decency and respect. The galaxy was still a dizzyingly diverse and often fractious place, with much hard work ahead to heal old wounds and injustices, but no longer would any species be condemned to suffer in lonely isolation for the mere crime of being different. There would be human and Corellian voices at the table for every discussion that could impact their worlds and peoples, as was only right. And those who sought to shut them out or deny their fundamental equality would find themselves sorely mistaken. Never again would the Corellians be shunned as outcasts, condemned to haunt the fringes as half-mythical rock devils. Never again would humanity be dismissed as uncultured upstarts and savages, unworthy of a place in galactic civilization. For the two species had proven themselves, through their unwavering alliance and commitment to each other in the face of adversity, to be so much more than the crude stereotypes imposed upon them. In each other, they had found not just a strategic partner but a true friend and an equal, one whose strengths complemented their own. Together, they had broken the old galactic order over their knee and opened the door to a brighter future for all. And as they stepped through it, side by side, into a new era of cooperation and progress, humans and Corellians at last took their places as respected leaders among the stars. All because they dared to see the worth and wisdom in what the galaxy had once dismissed as rock monsters and savages. In each other, they discovered the most unlikely of allies, and through their unshakable bond, they transformed not only their own destinies but those of the galaxy at large. A strange, wondrous twist of fate none could have predicted, but perhaps it was always inevitable, given the two species' shared legacy of defying convention and expectation. Human and Corellian, rebel and outcast, savage and monster, in the end, their true strength came not from denying these labels but embracing them and making them their own. For what were the Corellians if not majestic monsters, as powerful and enduring as the very bedrock from which they sprang? And what were humans if not glorious savages, untamed and unbroken by the strictures of the old order? Together, there was no limit to what these twin menaces could achieve, and they had eternity to revel in it.